Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening in Europe. Good day in US. I'm not sure if we have any Asian or Australian listeners, but we will talk today about VAT, about European taxes, and I would like to introduce our guest today. Is Claire Taylor. She is representing company called Simply VAT, simplyvat.com, and she will be sharing today with us some core information about European VAT and European taxes for Amazon sellers in Europe. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Augustus. Really nice to talk to you again.
All right. Probably we don't need to stretch the time, and maybe shortly you can tell to the audience what Simply VAT is doing. How do you help Amazon sellers?
Okay, well, Simply VAT, we provide international VAT solutions primarily for people that sell online. And obviously with Amazon's services and infrastructure, the logistics that they provide sellers, it comes with VAT obligations. So we help with all the VAT compliance needs. I'll go into a bit more detail about what services are needed in my presentation. But yeah, we're kind of here to help online retailers keep selling successfully and compliantly.
All right. So I know many people came here to listen to the basics of taxes in Europe. Let's do it.
Okay.
So if you can just share the screen, and we will start the presentation.
Okay. If you
so the green button at the top.
Yeah. Thank you.
And everyone who is listening to us right now, just confirm once again if you can hear us and see us properly, so we are sure that you can get the information. All right, we see your screen.
Okay.
Yep, I think we can start. I am still waiting for the answers if people can see us. Yes, we have positive responses. Good, let's start.
Okay, brilliant. So I think we discussed, Augustus, I'll talk through kind of what people need to know, and we'll have questions at the end.
Yes, we will. I hope people will be asking us questions, so we can go more deeper into what you will be presenting, and probably we'll be answering some private questions as well. Let's go.
Okay, no problem. Okay, well, as Augustus said, I'm here today really to talk you through the VAT obligations that you using the Amazon services will trigger. So it's just all about which services and what you actually need to know. So just to give you a quick overview of what the presentation is going to cover this evening, I'm going to talk about what exactly VAT is. I think it's kind of fundamental for you guys to understand exactly why the tax authorities charge it, and really why the focus is on online retail when it comes to compliance at the moment. We'll look at Amazon services, each service and exactly what services they offer you, and then we're also then going to look at what services, which VAT obligations those services trigger. And then I'm just going to have a quick look also, we're looking possibly how you can make VAT work for you. It's an obligation, but there are ways to actually leverage it to increase your margin. So I'll give you a quick overview of that. And I am going to touch on Brexit again. I know it's been a year and there hasn't been much progress, but just to give you an idea how it may impact you when, if and when things change. Okay, so first of all, let's get down to basics. Two things in life are certain: death and taxes. So hopefully we're going to park death for a little bit longer, at least till my presentation's over, and concentrate on the taxes, because it's the knowledge of taxes and VAT that's going to breathe longevity into your online businesses. What do you, as an online retailer, need to think about when selling in Europe? Usual response is head down in the sand. and it can work for a while, but it's not a permanent solution. So I'm going to talk you through what you need to know. I'm going to start by explaining what VAT is. And the clue's kind of in the name. VAT stands for value added tax, and VAT gets charged whenever value is added in the supply chain. For example, from the raw material supplier to the manufacturer, VAT is added to that transaction. Then from the manufacturer to the wholesaler, again, VAT will be on that invoice. From the wholesaler to the retailer, and then VAT on the final transaction to the final consumer. VAT rates range from 17 to 27% across the EU, and it's actually favoured both inside the EU and outside in over 140 countries worldwide, because governments get revenue every step of the supply chain. So it's a really popular tax for governments to implement. But it's not supposed to be a burden to businesses, as any VAT collected on sales is offset against any VAT paid once a company is obviously VAT registered and there's a mechanism to reclaim that VAT. The burden is actually with the final customer. So you're going to see during the presentation, it's for this reason the tax authorities are focusing their attention on e-commerce and distance sales, because the VAT paid by your customers on your online sales is revenue the tax authorities get to keep. So I want to just give you, explain the application of the taxation laws throughout the EU, again, to help you understand the differences that you're going to come across with the different countries if you end up registering for VAT in multiple EU countries. The EU is a single market that uses an apparently standardised system of laws which apply to all the member states, all the countries of the EU. However, this is where the confusion lies. It's envisaged as a single market, but each country is responsible for the collection of its own taxes, including VAT. So the 28 countries have interpreted one set of rules quite differently, different VAT rates on different products, different frequency of reporting and collecting the VAT owed. So that's really, why you come across the differentials in the EU countries. So I'm going to look at actually the services that Amazon provide in Europe. Amazon have really been ramping up its efforts in Europe in the last few years, but particularly lately, it now offers access to EU customers through 5 marketplaces: Germany, UK, Spain, Italy and France. It's got 31 distribution centres in 7 countries and is constantly looking, obviously, to increase this number. Amazon wants its sellers to access the huge mature e-commerce market within the EU, which last year grew another 12%. Now the market is worth a staggering 500 billion euros. That's 296 million shoppers in Europe currently spending on average 1,500 euros a year. It's great opportunities for online sellers like yourselves to access these new markets and obviously increase your profits. It really is a no-brainer. So what does Amazon actually offer you? It offers a selection of services on how to get your goods to your European customers. And it's important to understand these as they hold the clues to where the VAT treatment, which VAT treatment should apply. So first of all, it would probably teach your grandmother to suck eggs, but we'd just go through these because it is important in terms of the VAT treatment. The merchant fulfilled network, where you just use Amazon to advertise and sell your goods, but they're fulfilled from either your own warehouse or another third-party warehouse, but not an Amazon warehouse. That's the difference. Then there's a European fulfillment network. Your goods are stored in one Amazon location, and all deliveries across Europe are made from this one warehouse. Then you've got the multi-country inventory service, where goods are stored in multiple Amazon warehouses around Europe, and you get to actually choose which fulfillment centers your goods are stored in. You might think you get traction, or you get traction, for example, in the German market and the UK, so you would just use those two locations to house your stock via the Amazon warehouses. Then they've introduced the new Central European FBA service. So your goods are receiving exposure through the Amazon German marketplace, but your stock is held in the Czech Republic and Poland, and it's stored there to replenish the stocks in the German warehouse as and when they need replenishing, due obviously to demand on your goods. And finally, the big daddy of them all, the Pan-EU service, which was launched mid-year last year. And this is where you would ship your goods to one fulfillment center, and then Amazon manage the distribution across their whole infrastructure, these 31 distribution centers throughout the EU. So the Amazon, we're just going to look a bit more in detail on the Pan-EU. So the Pan-EU fulfillment service allows you to sell in 5 marketplaces to access an incredible number of EU customers, which I touched on before. Your goods are stored in any one of the 7 Amazon fulfillment centers. Amazon really works hard to make sure the products are moved closer to the final buyer, all about the buying experience with Amazon. But with this, you don't actually know where your goods are at any one time. Amazon are just working its magic behind the scenes through its logistics network. So it sounds great, and it is great, you know, for you guys being able to use the Amazon's phenomenal infrastructure without your own investment to get to such a massive and receptive market is pretty impressive, and again a no-brainer. But there's always a but in these things. Most of the Amazon fulfillment services actually trigger European Union VAT obligations, which I'm going to talk you through now. So whether you're inside or outside the EU, and however you get your goods into the Amazon fulfillment center, is we could talk about another time, but say your goods are now, you sent them to an Amazon fulfillment center in the EU, maybe you've sent them to one or to many of the fulfillment centers in the EU to access your EU customers. The first really important piece of VAT legislation you need to be aware of, that holding stock in an EU country triggers an automatic obligation to VAT register there. As a non-resident of that country, there are no thresholds to exceed, so you need to be VAT registering straight away. Now, if you relate this back to the Amazon services I just talked you through, for example, if you use their European fulfillment network service, say your American company using Amazon FBA in the UK, you'd need a UK VAT registration where your stock is held just in that one place. If you're using the multi-country inventory service, say again you've got your stock in the UK and Germany, you would need a VAT registration in the UK and one in Germany. And if you're using the new Central European service, you think you've got your stock in Czech Republic, Poland and Germany, so you're going to need 3 VAT registrations in place to be able to use that service compliantly. And then obviously the biggest commitment comes if you use the Pan-EU service, and this triggers the need for 7 VAT registrations. Your goods are going to be in any one of the countries: Germany, France, Italy, Spain, UK, Czech Republic, Poland. And the last 2, although they're not marketplaces, they're holding warehouses, so that it triggers a VAT obligation. It's a big commitment in terms of VAT compliance: 7 VAT registrations, about 64 VAT returns a year, and a number of other reporting requirements such as EC sales list and potentially Intrastat declarations are triggered. But you offset this obviously with the traction and the exposure you get to this massive market through the brilliant Amazon selling machine. And it's actually really easy to sign up to the Pan-EU service. In your seller's central account, there's actually one tick box between you and a 7-country VAT obligation with its 64 VAT returns a year and other VAT reporting requirements, as I've just talked you through. So in your Seller Central account, if you want to find out, go to the drop-down Fulfillment by Amazon button, click through and find out if you should be VAT registered. You might already have this VAT obligation that you might not even have known about. So if you're a smaller seller and you want to find your feet in Europe first, when we talk to our customers, we don't recommend you jump into the Amazon Pan-EU service straight away. There's other options that are not so heavy on VAT compliance, like, for example, using the European fulfillment network, get VAT registration in one country. And I'm going to go on and explain the distance selling rules, but that's a good way, a really good soft landing in being able to increase your sales. If you're fairly new to the game, it might be, say, a bit like you trying to sell in Walmart or Tesco's straight away instead of opening up, potentially a corner shop. When you're just starting out, you might want to make your mistakes slowly and learn on the way, or you like rushing in, maybe making expensive mistakes and repenting at leisure. VAT obligation in 7 countries with these 64 VAT returns, etc., takes commitment from you as the seller. And just another note with the Pan-EU about what it triggers for companies based outside the EU. For companies, non-EU companies, in some countries, a fiscal representative is required when VAT registering. And in relation to the Pan-EU service, those countries are France, Italy, and Poland. What is a fiscal rep? It is somebody who is jointly and severally liable for the VAT you owe as a seller. So it's not going to come cheaply. They're going to want bank guarantees in place, or they could be higher fees, but it's all about, mitigating their risk and not being exposed, as I said, to the VAT you as the non-EU seller would owe. One way to kind of sidestep the fiscal representation requirement for non-EU companies is to actually establish a company in the EU. A lot of companies, non-EU companies, come into the UK, establish a company, and this means that the EU to EU rules apply and no fiscal representation is required. And the UK, obviously at the moment we're still in the EU, is an easy country to set up a established company because it doesn't need a UK director, etc. So there's reasons why it's easy, but if and when Brexit happens, there's other options, for example, like Malta. As I understand it, it's not a speciality, but Malta is going to start to be a good place to establish these companies. So I touched briefly before just about the distance selling rules. Now, again, this is a second set of rules that are really relevant to Amazon sellers. So if you're selling to consumers, any sales service from the fulfillment centers or from your own, say, warehouse or wherever, any goods you sell cross-border within the EU to private consumers are governed by what's called the EU VAT distance selling rules. Now, these rules apply even if you're not a registered business, if you're a sole trader, if you're sat in your bedroom selling on eBay and Amazon, they absolutely apply to you. Be fully aware the marketplaces do not take responsibility for accounting and paying the VAT on your behalf. The responsibility lies with you as the seller. And please note, these rules only apply to your sales to consumers inside the EU. Any sales to consumers outside the EU are classed as exports, and a different set of rules apply. So we're just talking about sales within the EU that the EU distance selling rules apply to. So what exactly are these rules? The rules state that VAT should be charged locally until the VAT registration thresholds set by each EU tax authority are exceeded in that particular country within a calendar year. So in most countries, EU countries, the distance selling threshold is €35,000 or the equivalent, except Germany, Netherlands and Luxembourg, where it's €100,000. And in the UK, we have a distance selling threshold of £70,000. So, for example, if you're a German seller selling to British consumers, you can sell, and you've got a VAT registration in Germany, you can sell up to £70,000 worth of goods before you have to then VAT register in the UK. So you can access all the EU countries just from one location in terms of VAT compliance obligations until you hit the thresholds. And we tell the sellers it's really the best way to start. You can test the EU market without this heavy cost of VAT compliance in terms of obviously resources, time and cost. Be aware, if you don't register, the tax authorities will issue penalties and interest payments for later or non-compliance. I really want to put it in perspective, especially if you've got medium to high value goods. It doesn't take much to breach the smaller thresholds of a lot of the European countries. As you can see, really, if you're selling, say, expensive leather luggage, you might sell, 50 or 70 of them to actually breach the threshold, say, in Belgium or Italy, for example. So these are the two rules. Having stock in a country triggers an immediate need to VAT register, and the distance selling rules are the two rules, primary rules that online retailers need to think about when selling to private consumers in Europe. And if you don't comply, please don't think you can go under the radar anymore. It started off in about 2011. There was a reported £193 billion lost in underdeclared VAT. Last year, the figure alone in the UK was £10 billion lost each year. The tax authorities, there's mutual cooperation in place. They share data, they talk to each other, and particularly now they go to the marketplaces. We have many, many cases where Amazon has been approached to provide seller data, and they provide it, and then the seller will get a letter from the tax authority. You, as the online seller, really need to be aware of your VAT obligations, because ignorance of the rules does not stand up in court. Give you an example of this. One of our clients, a very seasoned businessman, started selling on Amazon in 2007, everything going brilliantly, really profitable business. 18 months ago, he got two letters, one from the German tax authorities and one from the French. Because of these distance selling rules, he owed each tax authority €1 million each. He didn't know, he'd been paying it in the UK. He took the single market kind of to its literal word and thought it was okay to pay it in the UK. And then to top it all, the German tax authorities whacked on a €180,000 interest penalty charge as well. So it took a year of worry and focus away from the business to sort this out, and it really could have been avoided. Stay ahead of the game. Registering on time is really going to avoid a lot of headaches for you in the future. And also, the tax authorities are getting much more proactive. The UK government last year gave the UK tax authorities new powers to combat non-VAT compliance by non-EU businesses. Firstly, they're making the marketplaces like Amazon and eBay liable if the seller is non-compliant. So Amazon, now that if you don't provide the right paperwork, they can shut your account down in 30 days. And they've got a deadline going at the moment. They're asking sellers to provide a valid UK VAT number. I think it's by the 30th of September, otherwise the stores will be shut. So if HMRC is still not happy with a seller, they can ask them to appoint a tax representative, and this has the same implications as a fiscal rep, makes the representative jointly liable for the VAT owed. So it's going to come with a cost again. The representative is not going to expose themselves to the debt to the VAT that you're going to owe. They're also introducing what they call fit and proper tests for warehouses, for fulfillment centres, and the warehouses are next year going to be required to sign up to register and be able to actually look at the people that are using their service and look at the people using the service and make sure that the fulfillment center is actually understanding that the sellers that are using their service are compliant. Otherwise, there will be consequences to not having checked the people using the logistics, the fulfillment services. So it's not possible anymore to ignore your VAT compliance obligations, especially at the moment in the UK. And if you want more information, HMRC has issued guidelines on their website, which I'm sure, Augustus, we can share the link afterwards if people are interested. Really take your VAT obligations seriously. Okay, so that's looking at the Amazon services, and we developed this table just to show you the different services and the VAT obligations that those services probably trigger. So again, this can be supplied afterwards, and you can have a look and see where potentially you've had exposure if you're not already dealing with it. So that covers looking at the VAT obligations the Amazon services trigger. As I mentioned at the start, I just really wanted to touch on maybe using the VAT rules to make your business a bit more profitable and just leverage some kind of information. First of all, really want you to think about your pricing and margins. Now, remember, and I know it differs in America and Canada, but remember the price shown in the European Amazon marketplace includes VAT. It's not added afterwards. So I want to kind of talk you through this. So we've got some sample Amazon data here to show you what I mean. The product sale price is £16.97. and VAT is going to be calculated on this amount. Here, we're showing you the gross profit. So it's your sale price minus your Amazon costs and the cost of your good to start with. But also remember, you've now got to apply an additional 20% VAT of the sale price. And if you haven't accounted for this, it might actually negate any profit you had within your margins. You really need to make sure you're calculating this in. Even if you don't have a VAT obligation already, I would absolutely put 20-25% extra. So when the VAT obligations come into play, you're not caught short. You've got room in your margins to stay competitive in the local market that you've chosen. Remember, goods vary, or the VAT rates vary across Europe from 17 to 27%. Have you got enough room in your margins to be able to accommodate those variations? It's all about market research, looking at the local competition. When VAT does become relevant, are you still going to be able to compete? So get your margins right, first of all, and make sure VAT is calculated in that, even if it's not relevant immediately. Another area to think about is to give you a bit of a commercial advantage, is leveraging the different VAT rates that are applied to different products in Europe. Every country has a standard and reduced rate for different products, and some countries have zero rated items. For example, in the UK and Ireland, coffee is zero rated, VAT books, children's clothing, and also safety equipment like cycle helmets and motorcycle helmets, etc. So if you've got enough flexibility in your business model to pick and choose the products you're selling, you might want to pick one of these. You won't be having to pay 20% VAT over to the tax authorities, or 23% as it is in Ireland. You get to keep that. That's just your profit. Okay, I'm just going to touch on Brexit. Obviously, things have not really moved on in the last year, and we're all waiting to see actually what deal will be struck. It's really very much up in the air. But if it goes to the plans of what people wanted when voting to leave the EU, it will mean that the UK will leave the single market and will no longer have access to it. Obviously, a different deal might be negotiated in the end, but if we just take this as it is at the moment, no access to the single market. And goods and services from the UK will have to be imported into the EU. Very similar to maybe the experience of our non-EU sellers getting goods into the UK or into Germany or wherever at the moment. Very similar, paying import VAT, duty, etc. So that's likely to happen. There's not really much going to change in relation into importing into the UK, we don't think, because the UK will probably keep the VAT system. It'll be too costly to change it, but also it works and it's a great revenue earner. Well, it works for the government, it doesn't work for everybody, of course, but it's a great revenue earner for the UK Treasury. So if you still want to access the UK market and use the Amazon Fulfillment Centre after Brexit, we think you would still need a UK VAT registration in place. However, if you want to access the EU after Brexit, you're going to want to import your goods to a still existing EU countries such as France or Germany maybe, and from here, so you'd get your goods into Europe, put them in a warehouse in France or Germany, and then you could leverage the distance selling rules that I was talking to you about to access the other kind of 27 EU countries or 26 EU countries, because the UK would have left with the distance selling rules. And in terms of avoiding fiscal representation, instead of maybe setting up a UK company, you'd have to choose another EU company, a country, such again as France, Germany, Ireland or Malta, as I said, supposed to be quite easy to be able to avoid those fiscal rep costs. So before Brexit, you might have, say, one UK VAT registration in place and a UK company in place, if, for example, you're a non-EU company, just to be able to access Europe through the distance selling rules. After Brexit, if you still want to access the UK market, you still need a UK VAT registration in place, but then you would need an additional EU country registration in place and a different EU company possibly in place if it made commercial sense to avoid the fiscal representation costs. So it will mean probably an increased cost of compliance. And we'll have to wait and see what will happen. The landscape, the post-Brexit landscape is very unclear at the moment. So in the meantime, it's very much business as usual. If and when Brexit comes, there will be ways to access the European market. And when that happens, we'll obviously keep you all up to date with how you will be able to do that. So it's very much going to be business as usual afterwards. So planning and preparation is the key. With the right information and right strategies, European Union VAT does not have to be a barrier to your international expansion plans. Kind of just a word of warning, VAT can be complex. You obviously don't know what you don't know until it comes and bites you on the nose, probably. But beware of quick wins. If VAT, if something's not done correctly, it can result in penalties and interest charges being applied later down the line. So it's all about making sure you know you're VAT compliant and things are getting done properly. Obviously, Simply VAT, we use VAT experts with like over 20 years experience in VAT to ensure customers receive a quality service. But ultimately, we want to ensure that you keep trading successfully and compliantly. And what this means to you is that you'll be able to sleep at night. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to go through, Augustus. Details here on how you can get in touch with us, but obviously open for questions.
Okay. So yeah, also I put a link below this video so people can access your website easily. Is it end of presentation?
Yeah, shall I stop sharing the screen?
Yes, we can stop sharing the screen. And I think, yeah, taxes and VAT is so complex that I would not suggest for sellers to play around themselves unless maybe they are just starting out, and then probably it's not advisable to sign up for pan-EU, so that you deal yourself just with one country's taxes, not with 7 country taxes. So
Yeah, and it's obviously also about what the time and resources you've got to afford. Obviously, the more you're selling, the easier it is to allocate the resources or buy the resources in to cope with the obligations of the pan-EU.
So of course, if someone wants to go to do serious e-commerce business, it's advisable to hire e-commerce VAT specialist, I guess, a company like simplyvat.com. But I wanted to ask your opinion. Some sellers, they've heard a few months ago, I think in June, 2 months ago, there was an announcement by Amazon that they are giving now Amazon VAT services as one of the options. And the price was very affordable, very cheap, 400 euros a year per country. What is your opinion? This service is provided by one big company in UK, I think, or it's international company.
Yeah, it's a company called Avalara. That they cut their teeth on American sales tax software, and they launched in Europe, I think, about 2-3 years ago. Yeah, we're obviously watching it with curiosity about the new VAT services. I can completely understand why Amazon want to get rid of this kind of blockage in terms of sellers. When the pan-EU service was introduced, the VAT obligations hadn't really been thought about, and it was a massive blocking point for sellers. And Amazon have really, this is them trying to solve that problem to be able to get sellers to be able to sell to customers. Completely understand it. It does worry me, knowing the complexities of VAT. It's so cheap. I believe it's they're bringing it in to kind of buy up the market, and it's completely unsustainable in providing kind of expert VAT support. It's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out, but also obviously we're aware of what the competition are doing. I think I would read the small print. I think I saw something recently where, for example, EC sales lists are not included in the price. Don't quote me, but that's just something I saw recently. But that needs checking out. Just check the small print and make sure you're getting covered for all your VAT obligations in that amount. Yeah, I just think it's going to be really curious. And the other thing that happens if it isn't done properly, the tax authorities will come after the sellers and apply penalties and interest payments for wrongly declared VAT or misdeclared VAT, etc., etc. So yeah, we're just waiting to see what happens. I think obviously Amazon has an incredible amount of sellers, and Avalara are having to cope with the influx maybe of the interest in that service, and whether they can deliver a comprehensive service is yet to be seen. So I think time would tell on it. The jury's out. For us, we cannot even start to compete with that price. We could not offer a quality service and ensure proper compliance for our customers. And we're not going to try and compete with it. We believe they're providing almost a software solution that's very automated. It's not what we provide at all.
Yeah, I think it's automated. That means there is probably no human interaction. And if you want interaction, you just have to pay their consultants. This is my guess. Yeah. And so there are a few questions in the audience. Someone was asking, do I need to register company and VAT in each EU country where Amazon FBA has warehouses, or just one EU company is fine?
One EU country, one EU company in one EU country is fine to get rid of the fiscal representation obligations in all the EU countries.
And also, you mentioned in one of your last slides that in case of a Brexit, and if, let's say, rules are changing, sellers might need to search to incorporate themselves in some other European country. Do you know which other European country might have such good, or how to say, business-friendly taxes like in UK?
Ireland is actually really good. The problem with Ireland is I think you need an Irish director but for example, corporation tax is 12.5% there. I've heard Malta. I don't know the corporation tax rate I can't think of it now, but I heard Malta is a good country to set a company up because it's easy to do so. But I don't know about the corporation tax implications. It's we're very much VAT focused.
I think I've heard that in Bulgaria, corporate tax is also like 10%, but of course it's a different language, so there might be
different alphabet as well. Yeah. Not even guessing. I couldn't start guessing on it.
Okay, another question is, could you clarify if a person sells in Amazon UK and Amazon pays to his bank account in his country, do I have to pay taxes in his does the seller should pay taxes in his country or in UK? I think it's not related, bank account and taxes.
No, they would have their VAT obligation in the UK, but I think they would have their corporation tax in their own country. But again, get proper corporation tax advice because it's not our focus. VAT is our focus.
Yes, and another one from a seller from US. How seller based in US could start selling in EU? Is there some quick how-to guide available? I know you have some ebooks. I put a link below this description, below this video. Do you have in those ebooks anything useful for US-based sellers?
Well, we have a lot of US customers. We always say a really good soft landing. Get your goods over to Amazon FBA UK. There's no language. Well, apparently there's no language differential. You just need one UK VAT registration in place. In the UK, you can file your VAT annually, keeps the cost of compliance down, and you can leverage the distance selling rules. So you only have to have the UK VAT registration in place until you hit those set thresholds I was talking about. So it's a really soft landing. It's really manageable for people just wanting to dip their toes into Europe. And it's really good now while the UK is still in Europe to do it now and see how much traction you get. You start in the UK, dip your toes in Germany, France, etc. It's a really good soft landing for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then afterwards, as you say, maybe Ireland will be a good choice. The only problem that Ireland doesn't have Amazon warehouses. So
yeah.
Someone is asking, what if I set up a company in Belize? Can I get away with taxes?
I don't know. Again, if you set a company up in Belize, it's all about whether you've got your stock in Europe. So I don't know what taxes they're trying to avoid in Belize. In terms of the VAT obligations, you can have a company in Belize, but then if you're using the Amazon fulfillment centers, you're going to get this VAT obligation. And again, because the tax authorities, this is what I was talking about with HMRC, putting pressure on Amazon, the seller has to have a valid VAT number, otherwise Amazon shut your shop down. So I think there's only so much going under the radar people can get away with these days.
And I think now there are a lot of stories that Amazon and tax authorities in UK are chasing Asian Chinese sellers and shutting down. So I think it doesn't matter if you're from China or from Belize.
No.
Well, if you are not paying taxes, you will have troubles at
some
point.
And the EU are actually holding the UK to account for not dealing with it sooner. I think they want to issue a fine. I can't remember the amount, but it's billions. Well, probably millions of pounds, because the UK, because they haven't been focused on stopping the non-compliant non-EU sellers. For example, France and Germany, they're all losing out on their revenue of taxes because the goods are getting imported into the UK and kind of flooding the market under the radar.
Mm-hmm. Someone is asking, says, so it doesn't matter in which country you establish a company, it's the same rules and regulations. Is there a difference between which country when a company is established? I think it can be a question from maybe North American seller, and I think it's important to understand that, yeah, every country has different rules, so there is a difference.
Yeah, where you have to look in which country would work for you. There's different rates of corporation tax, there's kind of different rules and regulations, there's different costs, there's different filing obligations. You have to file annual accounts, for example, in the different countries. It's really about doing the research, but also if you're going to set up a EU company, the reason to do this in terms of VAT is to avoid the fiscal representation costs and bank guarantees in place. So it's about doing the sums and seeing if the fiscal representation costs outweigh the cost of having a company in that country. It really is a simple calculation.
Amazon has warehouses in 7 countries in Europe, and in which countries it is obligatory to have fiscal representation if you don't have a company there?
Italy, France, and Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason why we say to sellers, come and use Amazon UK, FBA, or the UK again. There's no fiscal representation requirement, or Germany is another good one, except with Germany you have to file VAT returns monthly. So the UK is a better option because you can actually file annually. So it's all about making commercial decisions, especially while you're starting, and keeping your costs down.
Okay, and someone is saying, what if I have dual citizenship, EU and US? Can I fly over to UK and open an LTD there to pay less in fees, or I would need a physical address?
No, you can set up a company, and usually you have to file annual accounts in the UK. So you would get an accountant, and they could act as your registered office. So you don't physically have to come at all. And now there's ways of opening bank accounts up, using notarized documents without physically coming to the UK, for example. So
I think it also doesn't matter which passport you hold.
No, it's kind of where the company is established.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, if he's got dual EU, I'm sorry, I don't know which country you said he's got. It might be good. If he's I don't know, Portuguese or Spanish or something, open up a company there. There'll be kind of probably more understanding of the language and the laws where your EU kind of part of you is based.
Another question we got was, what are the steps of filing and paying your VAT return in the UK? The steps in filing and paying.
Okay, so in terms of compiling a VAT return, once you're VAT registered, you can, what you need to do is charge VAT on the sales you make, and also you'll get charged, for example, if you're importing goods into the UK, you'll get charged import VAT, or if you purchase goods in the UK, you would get charged UK VAT. So the VAT return is really about offsetting the import VAT against the output VAT. And making sure the right VAT rates are applied against your sales. And then this is submitted to the UK tax authority at the frequency that's either chosen because of your turnover. For example, you can file annually if your turnover is less than, I think it's 1.35 million. So it just depends on the frequency. You might have to file quarterly, or some massive businesses file monthly. So that's a process.
And is it possible to do it online in UK?
Yeah, you can sign up to HMRC. You sign up, getting a username and password, and you can do it quite easily.
And then they provide information where you have to transfer the money once you file the documents.
Yeah, absolutely. They tell you exactly where you need to pay it. And when you do pay VAT, please put your VAT number as a reference, because sometimes sellers don't, and the tax authority can't match the payment with your own VAT file. So it takes HMRC 6-7 weeks sometimes to find payments. So it's a bit, it's kind of tedious, and you don't need to worry that they're going to apply interest and everything else if they can't find your payment. So always make sure your VAT number is your bank reference when you send those.
And someone is asking, you say to register a company in UK, but because of Brexit, we will eventually have import taxes for every sale, correct? Every sale which was not in UK.
Yeah, so yeah, as I said in the presentation, UK is only valid while we're still in the EU. It's yet to be seen, you know, even if Brexit's going to happen at the moment, it seems a little bit of a dog's dinner. So, but absolutely right. As I was showing you at the end, if you set up a company in the UK, it might not be valid in 2 years' time or 18 months' time when Brexit happens. But this is where you're looking for alternatives. Like I said, Malta looks like an attractive thing, but you know, it's just what's coming. But you're absolutely right. It's a bit uncertain at the moment what's going to happen.
And we never know. Maybe there will be some agreement between UK and EU that there will be these extra taxes. Who knows?
Who knows? we honestly, yeah, it's going to interesting times. Obviously, we'll see.
Elder is asking, could you clarify one thing? So the VAT that you have to pay back is coming from your profits, right? Not like in US where a sales tax is added at the checkout automatically. Then you collect and pay it back.
Yeah, that's the slide I showed you where you know applying. Yeah, it absolutely, especially on Amazon, it's included in the sale price. So you need to it's taken off of the sale price. It's absolutely kind of comes out your profits, and that's what I was trying to allude to. That people need to make sure, even if, especially for example, UK sellers, we've got a really high local threshold here of I think it's £85,000 now. So you might not be VAT registered yet, but when it becomes relevant, make sure you've got room in your margins to pay over that VAT.
And Helgi is asking any links to what are VAT rates for different countries. I think the best is just to Google, and there is a Wikipedia page, I'm sure, about European Union country VAT rates.
Yeah, we've got one on our website. I can't remember the exact place now, but maybe I can send it to you afterwards, and you can put it, I don't know, near the presentation or something. It will say kind of Google EU VAT rates, the European Commission. That's the website you can get them from. But if not, get in touch with me directly, and I'll forward it.
Can you repeat how can people get in touch? I remember there was a slide, but you can just maybe repeat your email address.
Yeah, please do get in touch. We've obviously got a few email addresses. There's here to help, HERETOHELP, here to help at simplyvat.com. Or there's myself, Claire, CLAIRE.Taylor at simplyvat.com. Or there's actually a form on the website to send us through some information, and we can talk to you about your specific situation.
And someone wants to clarify, so you don't pay VAT in UK until you reach £70,000?
No, that can't. Don't take that on face value. You need. It's all about the situation. So if you're a UK-based business, there's a local threshold of £85,000, but that only applies to you if you're a UK-based business. You don't have to VAT register until you exceed that threshold. If you're distance selling from another EU country into the UK, there's a £70,000 distance selling threshold. Otherwise, if you're a non-resident, so you could be an EU company or non-EU company, if you're non-resident and your stock is sat in Amazon FBA UK, you have to register if your stock is here, unless you're a UK-based company, and then you've got this leeway till £85,000 before you have to register. Is that clear?
I hope so. I know it's these things need to be read and heard many times to understand. That's why probably it's best to hire a professional. But then,
yeah, you could also play this recording in your sleep, and it will be subliminal messaging.
yes. Rossom wants to know, so you would not recommend starting UK Ltd company and using EFN from UK because of Brexit?
It's really not for me to say. Brexit might take 10 years to happen. you know, the point with the UK is it's a really easy place to set up a company. You're going to have at least probably 2 years life in that. It's really about you doing your research and seeing, for example, Ireland, you need a local Irish director, and other countries, you know, there's language obviously differences with France and Germany, etc. I think you have to have a German director in place with Germany. Malta, I understand, is a good place to go. So I would actually look at Malta in terms of just ensuring longevity. But at the moment, the UK is a great place to set up, and we do not know what's going to happen with Brexit. But it's up to you. It's not for me to kind of advise you on that. I'm just telling you, you know, what's working at the moment.
And Mihai from Romania, he wants clarification about these thresholds. So he says, I'm in Romania. He has a Romanian company. Can I sell up to 75,000 K before paying VAT?
But where?
Romanian companies selling, I understand they are selling in UK. So can they sell in UK before?
Yes. Yes, if they're VAT registered in Romania, £70,000, £70,000, they can sell up to that amount from stock in Romania. So they're sending the goods into the UK. The distance selling threshold is £70,000.
Right. And Helge was asking what kind of bank guarantee needed and when and why. I'm not sure what he's referring to.
Bank guarantees are required in some countries or by some fiscal representatives to, a fiscal rep is jointly liable for the VAT a seller owes. So if they obviously are not going to know the company, they're going to want guarantees in place to make sure that they're not exposed to any VAT the seller doesn't pay. So for example, you know, different countries have different rules and regulations. In Italy, you have to have a bank guarantee in place for 100% of the VAT you would owe. I think in France, at minimum, it's €5,000. It just depends on the size of your sales and your turnover and how much exposure the fiscal rep is gonna have. And they're just gonna want, you know, some solid, tangible guarantees. They're not going to be left holding the baby, if you like.
Razi is asking, what is the best way to calculate your VAT from your daily, weekly, monthly sale and keep your account updated all the time?
It's really up to you. It's just about applying the VAT rate to each sale that you make. Different VAT rates might apply to different goods and, you know, to different goods and services. So it's about applying the VAT rate to each transaction. And however often that does, it just needs to be comprehensive when the VAT return is filed. Obviously, so the tax authority may want to audit, so they're going to want reassurance. They're going to want to be able to look at the transactions line by line and make sure you've applied the right VAT rate at the right time.
And I think that Amazon Seller Central does have proper reports where you can see a breakdown of VAT. No, probably not.
To be honest, I haven't seen one for a while. There is a VAT transaction report, so I'm just off the top of my head can't remember what it contains. I'm not sure because they have been changing obviously their services to make it more VAT kind of compliant, if you like, and easier for sellers. So I'm not exactly sure if it contains the VAT now, but it has to be part. I think it's still you have to take the VAT out of the sale price, but I'm not sure exactly the breakdown of what's included in those new VAT transaction reports.
Helgi wants to clarify about distance selling thresholds. So if you are a non-EU company, does distance selling threshold, like they don't apply these thresholds? In other words, you need to register as soon as you start sales. You need to register VAT, I guess.
Yeah. No. What happens is if it's say a non-EU seller, they could be selling, they could be importing to their customers in the EU, and If the customer's accounting for the VAT, then the seller doesn't have to worry about VAT at all. But what happens, looking specifically at Amazon services, so a non-EU seller puts their goods in Amazon UK, and they can use the European fulfillment network, for example. So they've got their stock in the UK, and they can get exposure on Amazon, Germany, France, etc. So Amazon advertising their goods in those different marketplaces, but the stock is being sent from the UK. So the non-EU seller now, because the stock's in the UK, the distance selling rules apply from that stock in the UK. Does that make sense?
I hope.
I'm trying to be clear enough for people, make it simple to understand.
Mihai from Romania wants to clarify one more time about the 70K threshold.
Yeah.
He says he didn't understand if he can sell up to 70K in case if the stock is Romania, or this stock can also be held in UK. So can you clarify the difference when the stock is in both countries?
If the stock is in Romania, the threshold of £70,000 does apply. So he does not have to VAT register until his sales go over the £70,000. If his stock is in the UK, he has to VAT register immediately. There's no threshold. So the threshold applies from stock sold from Romania, and it does not apply for stocks in the UK.
Yes, it's more clear. Do you need a fiscal representative in the UK and Germany? I think we mentioned earlier that not. If you have established your company in UK and storing your goods in both countries. So UK company stores goods in UK and Germany, and do they need fiscal representative?
No, and if they're a non-EU company that started it, they don't need a UK company. If they're a non-EU company, they can have VAT registrations in both the UK and Germany without the need for a EU company in place. If they are a UK company and they've got stock in the UK, if they're not VAT registered yet because of our high local threshold, they don't have to be VAT registered until they hit that threshold in the UK. If they're a UK company, and if their stock's in Germany, they have to VAT register there straight away.
And the same person wants to know, I've heard that you can get your VAT back. Is it true? Getting VAT back. I think I'm also sometimes confused about this, getting back your VAT.
It depends what VAT you're talking about.
Okay, maybe let's take an example of a US entity selling in Europe and UK entity selling in Europe.
So if you a US entity, when your goods come into, say, the UK, you're going to be charged import VAT at the port of entry. You can get that VAT back through the UK VAT registration that you have in place. So you know, if you've got a VAT registration in place, there's a mechanism to get the VAT back. So yeah, you can.
And if it is UK company?
Yeah, because you'll have a UK, again, if you're VAT registered, again, there's a mechanism for the transaction to happen, if you like. So if you're VAT registered, you can absolutely get your VAT back on purchases or import VAT.
But I would not advise to calculate this yourself. Okay, a few more questions. I hope they will be the last ones. Will Amazon notify us to register VAT once we reach the 85K threshold, or they will suspend our selling account without giving us any warning?
Is that a UK company? Because the £85,000 threshold only applies to UK companies. I want to be really clear about that. I don't know what Amazon will do. For ourselves, for our clients, we monitor, we collect the data from all, say, people can be selling on Amazon, you know, have a Magento platform, sell on eBay, so you discount, we will collate the information from everywhere and monitor the distance sales. So we tell our clients when, you know, they're about to kind of have exposure in the different countries. Yeah, so I'm not sure what Amazon.
Yes, it is UK company, the person says. So
yeah.
I think, well, we don't know, of course, what Amazon does, but I don't think Amazon would monitor this because you never know. Maybe I sell 80,000, as you say, outside on Shopify and 5,000 on Amazon, so they cannot.
Yeah, it's for you as a seller to, you know, obviously just to keep a tabs on what your sales are, which should be, you know, something that you're doing anyway. It'd be quite exciting to watch your sales grow, so you know what your turnover is.
Yes. And let's take the last question. When importing goods from China, we pay import duty of 20%, and we also pay 20% VAT when selling your product, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, you pay the import VAT, okay, but this import VAT, if your VAT register, can be claimed back. The 20% you are charging on the sale, the customer is paying. It's not you paying. You're acting as a tax collector, if you like. So the customer's paying it, and the VAT, the import VAT, you pay, you get back. So it's not you're being hit twice. It's the kind of the process. As I said, you know, to start with, the VAT is not supposed to be a burden on business, kind of monetary wise. There is obviously this kind of cash flow, you know, shortfall that happens when you have to pay the import VAT straight away, but you do get it back if you're VAT registered.
And I think it's important to change your mindset that when you are selling in Europe for 100 euros, that there was some extra 20%. You have to just, well, how to say? You have to keep in mind that, yeah, what you are selling, the end price is not your profit, not your total income.
Yeah, I know some sellers get really excited and spend all the VAT on new goods to sell, and then they go, oh, whoops, I forgot to pay the VAT bill. But honestly, it doesn't stand up in court. You really need to be disciplined about separating the VAT from your profit.
All right, I see there is another question, but I think it's not related to European taxes. How UK sellers can pay taxes in USA? Do we need to register a company in USA? But I think it's not your competence.
It's not, no, but we've got great partners there. TaxJar. I understand there's a sales tax amnesty going on. We've got some really good American partners. So again, I can pass that information on to people if they want it. There's similar rules about holding stock in different states, about creating what's called a nexus, about getting a sales tax obligation, etc. So if you need to know, we do have some partners that we can put people in touch with.
All right. I think that's all for tonight. Claire, could you open your slide with your contact details so we can share with the audience one more time so that people can write down your email, your website address, and yes. How do you serve Amazon sellers? Could you just repeat one more time?
Yeah, well, obviously we can provide the VAT registrations in any of the 28 EU countries. We also provide the EC sales list reporting that comes into play, especially with the pan-EU service, because the transfer of stock between the warehouses triggers the need to file EC sales lists. We also provide Intrastat declarations, which are triggered when sales between EU countries go over certain amounts. We can monitor your distance selling thresholds, and we can provide kind of bespoke consultancy work. So yeah, we're kind of all-round solution, and we're also just in the process of developing a software which should be ready in the autumn, which we're really excited about, and look forward to introducing to not just Amazon sellers, but people that sell on any kind of channel online.
And Joe Reon is asking, what is the process when to start working with Simply VAT?
Just get in touch. If you're thinking of using the Amazon services, or you might already be using the Amazon services, you might not be that compliant yet and have been using the Amazon services for a while, just come and talk to us, and we'll have you know, really open kind of commercial conversations with you about the best way forward. Just get into touch, and we can start having those conversations.
Great. Thanks a lot, Claire. Thank you for your input, answering the questions. And yes, it was great to have you on this summit. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for having me, Augustus. Have a great summer, everybody.